It's fall, which is my favorite time of year. Today, I have got over 2 hours of fall meal inspiration for you guys. You are not going to want to miss this, so grab a cup of coffee and let's dive right in. I've got an awesome fall-themed meal prep video for you today. We are going to be making a broccoli salad as well as a Mediterranean chicken kale salad, which turned out delicious. I'm going to be sharing some Instant Pot chili as well as some pumpkin spice cake bites. And then last but not least, probably the best recipe in this particular video is the raspberry shortbread tart. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to prep are these pumpkin spice no-bake cake bites. This recipe showed up in my inbox this week from Minimalist Baker, and I was like, oh yes, I have to make this. So these are the ingredients you'll need: some pureed pumpkin, some dates. The recipe calls for 1.5 cups of walnuts. I'm not sure that I have enough, so if I don't, I'm gonna make up for it with pecans, some rolled oats, some cinnamon, and then the recipe calls for like a mixture of like allspice, clove, nutmeg, that kind of thing, but all of that stuff is in this pumpkin pie spice, so I'm just going to go ahead and use a combination of those, some vanilla, almond flour, and some salt. So the first thing that I did was measure my dates out into a container, and I'm just soaking those in some really hot water for about 10 to 15 minutes just until they soften up, and that will just help for the food processor to kind of puree them up a little bit easier. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is put my dates into my food processor. I mostly drained all of the water off. I was going to say also, if you have dates that have pits in them, make sure that you also soak them and take the pits out first, obviously. All right, so I'm just going to put the lid on this and process these until they're smooth. All right, so that looks pretty good, and this recipe is pretty simple. Then you just add all of the rest of the ingredients. So I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of almond flour, 1.5 cups of walnuts. Actually, I think I actually have enough. 3/4 cup of rolled oats. If you're doing gluten-free, just make sure you get gluten-free oats. 2 tablespoons of pumpkin puree. And then I have all my spices and my salt in this bowl. And I'm gonna add just about 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, if I can get it open. Okay, and then we're just gonna process this until it's smooth. All right, this recipe gave me a hard time. So I did have to add several tablespoons of water and a little bit more pumpkin to this because it would not process. Like, it just kept getting stuck. It was too dry. So the next step is to then taste it, which I did, and I added a little bit more salt. If you want to add more spices, you can. And then we're gonna scoop this out onto a tray, roll them into balls, and refrigerate them. Okay, so I've got a baking tray here, and Connor's gonna help me. This is a little
ice cream scoop.
Well, actually, I think they call this a cookie scoop. So you just see how you just get enough like that. Don't overfill it, just put it up to the level like that, and then pop it out on the sheet. And then we're gonna put them in the fridge, and then after they're cold, we'll roll them into balls. Okay, so you guys know I get all of my glasses from Warby Parker. So I wanna thank Warby Parker for sponsoring today's video. I've been working with them for a long time here on my channel, and I love their glasses. I have so many pairs of their glasses, but honestly, I haven't purchased a new pair in a while. I would probably say a year or more. And I just went to the eye doctor and got my prescription updated. So I actually ordered a home try-on box, and I ordered 2 new pairs of glasses last night. So I want to show you the ones that I ended up picking out. If you're not familiar with Warby Parker, they actually offer everything that you need for happier eyes. They have eyeglasses, sunglasses, contact lenses, and they also offer eye exams. You can shop with them online or in stores. If you're like me and you already have a regular eye doctor, you can still go and get your vision exam there. And what I ask them to do is just to print out a glasses prescription for me. And all I do is I take a picture of it with my phone, I upload it to the Warby Parker app. Then Warby Parker has my prescription, and anytime I want to order a new pair of glasses, I can do that. And I have to tell you, ordering glasses from Warby Parker is so much cheaper than getting them from the eye doctor. If you get 1 pair, they're just $95. They start at just $95, obviously depending on what kind of lenses that you choose, but if you get 2 pairs, which is what I did, you actually get 15% off. So I ordered 2 pairs of glasses for just $160, which is crazy. If you've ever picked out glasses at the eye doctor before, you know that sometimes the frames can be like $200 to $400, and that's not including the lenses. So I really like that Warby Parker makes getting super high quality glasses really accessible. And I have to tell you, I have ordered from other home delivery eyewear companies before, and they are not great quality. Warby Parker is awesome quality. I have to tell you, I have probably 3 pairs of glasses that are 4 to 5 years old, and they are still in great shape. So let me show you the ones that I chose. So I got 5 pairs in this box. This is a pair that I didn't choose because I already have a clear pair, but I really like these. They are the Bodhi. The other thing I really like about Warby Parker is that they offer different widths of glasses. So if you're not sure whether you're like a narrow or a wide or a medium width, you can order different widths and then try out which ones fit you best. You can obviously use their home try-on program where you pick out 5 pairs of glasses, they send them to you for free, and then you send them back with a prepaid shipping label. It's super easy, and then you can just go back on their website or their app and order the glasses that you like. Like I said, I really do like these, but I already have a clear pair, so I'm not gonna get those this time. This is one of the pairs that I chose. This is the Tony. This is a newer frame that they have, and I don't know, I just really like how comfy these are, and I just like the shape of them. I needed kind of a newer, more stylish pair of tortoiseshell glasses, so I really love those. And then the other pair I picked out was, I really wanted a pair of black frame glasses. I don't have a pair of black glasses, and I ended up choosing these. This one is the Santiago, and they're super comfortable. So if you guys want to try out Warby Parker, like I said, I've been using them for years. I highly recommend them. I actually used them even before I started working with them here on YouTube, and they have been a longtime supporter of my channel. So if you guys want to try 5 pairs of glasses at home for free, you can go to warbyparker.com/Jen. That's warbyparker.com/Jen. I'll have a link in the description box below, and I'll also have a little icon on the screen you can tap here if you're on your phone. And if you have an iPhone, they actually have a virtual try-on feature in their app. So if you're still not sure which 5 pairs to order in your home try-on, you can actually try them on virtually in their app just to kind of get a feel for the frames and if you like them or not. So thank you again to Warby Parker for sponsoring today's video, and thank you guys for always supporting me when I do sponsor content, and thank you for using my links. All right, so shout out to Connor for helping me with that with that task. So we rolled all these up. I'm not gonna count them because they're very unevenly spaced, but I'm gonna pop these in the refrigerator, and then when they are firm, we'll roll them into balls. And there's also a recipe for glaze for them that I think I'm gonna modify a little bit. All right, so here we are back at these pumpkin spice cake protein bites. I have to tell you guys, these did not really work out all that well. I'm gonna try to salvage them. I hate when that happens because I don't like sharing recipes with you guys that don't work all that well, but I'm not gonna lie and say, oh, this turned out great, when it really didn't. So these have been in the fridge for probably 12 hours at this point, and they're still a little stickier than I would like them to be. Now, I think that's because I had to add extra pumpkin and liquid to get the mixture to come together in the food processor, so it just isn't working all that well. So what I'm gonna do to try to salvage this is to take some of these pecans that I've chopped up really finely and roll them in there. I'm not gonna coat them totally, just enough so that they're not super like sticky. And then I'm gonna place them on this plate, and I have a glaze that I made with Swerve powdered sugar. Let me show you the package. This is what the package looks like. It's basically a powdered sugar replacement that's sugar-free. So I just mix this with a little bit of water, and then I think I'm gonna drizzle these over the top. So I'm just gonna roll these in the pecans, and then we'll drizzle them, and I'll show you what it looks like at the end. Okay, so here are the pumpkin spice bites after I rolled them in the nuts. So I'm just gonna drizzle some of this over the top, and then I am gonna taste one and tell you guys how they taste, because who knows, they might, you know, just be so delicious that it's worth the hassle, right? All right, I mean, they look really good. So here's my verdict on these. They are made like at least 10 times better with the addition of the pecans and the glaze on the top. To me, what they taste like is like a pumpkin pie filling with like a nut crust and then the sweet glaze on the top. So if you are a big pumpkin pie fan and you're looking for something with like less sugar, I would definitely try these. I don't know that I will be making them again because I feel like I could get the same type of feeling with either like a healthier pumpkin pie or like a pumpkin bar or pumpkin bread or something like that, but it never hurts to try, right? So if you guys try this, let me know. Again, I will link the recipe down below, but I am gonna store these in the fridge and we probably won't get them all eaten right away, so I'll put some of them in the freezer, but at least we'll have these for a little healthy sweet treat for the next couple weeks. The next thing I'm gonna show you guys is an easy broccoli salad. Now, I have made this before on my channel in more of a homemade fashion, but today I have time to do the shortcut method, so that's what I'm sharing with you. Both are delicious. If I have the time, I make the dressing from scratch, but like I said, we're gonna improvise today. So I have some broccoli. This has already been washed and it was just in my fridge, and I knew I had all the ingredients for this, so I thought we'd go ahead and make it. I do like to put cubed cheddar cheese in mine. I don't have any blocks of cheddar cheese right now, so we're gonna use cheese sticks, works just as well. I have some bacon bits. Again, you can cut, cook fresh bacon if you want, if you have the time. Some ranch dressing, Hidden Valley, only the best. This is actually always how I used to make this salad, is just with regular ranch dressing. The homemade is good too, like I said. I have some cranberries. You can also use raisins, and then some sunflower seeds. You can use walnuts or any other type of nuts, and then some salt and pepper. So the thing I think is one of the keys to this recipe is making sure that your broccoli is cut into small enough florets, because what you're gonna end up doing is mixing this all together and then just kind of letting it marinate in the fridge. And if your broccoli is too large, it will just stay really, really crunchy, which is fine. It's just like harder to eat that way. So I prefer to kind of cut it a little bit smaller. I think I've seen some recipes where like the broccoli is blanched. I personally don't think that's necessary, but to each their own. I haven't made this for a long time. I was thinking, I really think that Connor would like this because you guys know he loves the Valley Ranch. He loves to dip his cucumbers in ranch. And if I buy like any type of other ranch, he's like, is this ranch from the Valley? I'll be like, no, it's Kraft or whatever it is. He's like, ugh, I like the one from the Valley. This is a really good recipe to take to like get-togethers too. If you find yourself in that situation, it seems to go over pretty well. And the good thing is too, is that you can make it the day ahead because it holds up really well in the fridge since the broccoli is such like a hearty vegetable. All right, so I've got my broccoli chopped up. I also really just love making this for meal prep because it's super easy and it's really good and it lasts, kind of all week in the fridge. Okay, I'm gonna sprinkle some bacon bits in there. Just measure with your heart for this recipe. Another thing I will say about the cheese component of this particular recipe is that I have used shredded cheese before and I really don't recommend that. I think that if you use shredded cheese, it gets like soggy in the salad faster. So that would just be my recommendation. I'm gonna add some sunflower seeds and some craisins. I like craisins in mine. You don't have to add them if you don't want to. I don't even know if I'll eat this. I don't know that it would be a good choice with my braces. I don't know, I could probably do it. Adam really likes this though, so he'll probably end up taking it to work. Okay, so for the dressing part, I would just start with like a liberal squeeze and then go ahead and toss it and see how it looks. And if it looks dry, then go ahead and add some more. All right, I'm gonna add some salt and pepper. I probably should have had a bigger bowl. Okay, I'm just gonna add maybe a little bit more, not much. The broccoli will soak a little bit of the dressing up, obviously, so you just wanna keep that in mind. All right, so I was trying to figure out what containers I was gonna use to pack this in, and I remembered that I had these in the cupboards, so that's what I'm gonna use. These are like the Rubbermaid Clearview containers. I think they actually, okay, they're about 1 1/3 cups each. This recipe also looks really pretty packed in mason jars, like the 8-ounce ones. It's kind of a pain, like to get everything like funneled in there, so I'm not gonna mess with that today, but just know that you can do that, and it does look really pretty. All right, so here's my broccoli salad all packed up. So I'm gonna put the lid on these, stick them in the fridge. We have just a little bit left in the bowl there that didn't fit, but that's fine. Someone will have that for a snack tonight. But let me know if you guys have had this salad before or if you've made it. So like I said, it's definitely super easy to put together, really delicious, and I would definitely recommend it. I'll find a couple different recipes down below and link those. I'll try to find the one that has the homemade dressing as well as another one with prepared dressing, just so you guys have something to reference. So this is the recipe I'm gonna be sharing with you guys today for meal prep. I thought this would be really good for lunches this week. This is the Mediterranean chicken salad with kale, squash, and lemon aioli, which looks delicious. So I went ahead and took my chicken out of the bag and rinsed that off, dried it, and I'm gonna be seasoning that. I also washed my kale, so that was ready to go. But if you guys have never tried Green Chef, they're really great for meals during the week, but I also really like using their service for meal prep. You guys know that I work from home now, and it's really awesome to be able to prep these meals so that I can have them during the week. There's always like unique flavors and sauces that, you know, I might not think of on my own. You guys can see that everything comes pre-measured and perfectly portioned, and a lot of the stuff is even prepped, so it's ready to go. All right, so here's my chicken all seasoned up. The only thing you have to add when you get these meal kits is just salt, pepper, and olive oil. Everything else is included. So this is seasoned. I'm gonna go ahead and set this aside until it is time to cook it. Okay, so like I said, I did go ahead and wash the kale, so I'm just gonna spin that dry. One tip I do have for if you're working with kale is that sometimes when you get it from the store, it can be like a little bit limp just because it isn't quite, you know, hydrated because it's been in packaging. So if you just soak it in cold water for maybe about 10 to 15 minutes, you can see that it gets nice and hydrated and crispy again. So we love that. I've already taken the stems out also, which is really important. You don't want to eat those. I guess you could eat them if you really wanted to. They're super hard to chew up. I have used them in cooked dishes before, but you just kind of have to cut them super small. So this is going to be a salad, and you guys know that I got braces put on about a month ago. So when I eat salads, I need everything chopped up fairly small. So I'm gonna go ahead and chop this kind of into just bite-sized pieces. You could leave them larger if you wanted to. The reason I thought I would prep this particular meal out of the box was because kale is, I always think of kale as like a fall salad green. I know it's available year round, but just because it's so hearty, it can really stand up to dressings in the fridge, even if you pre-dress the salad. All right, so I've got a bowl here, and I'm gonna go ahead and transfer the kale to there. And we're actually gonna put some of the dressing on this ahead of time. So I'm gonna use one of the dressing packets now to dress the kale with, and then the other I'll just include on the side when I, you know, make up my meal prep containers. This is a dairy-free lemon aioli. You guys know that I've been eating mostly paleo for, I don't know, I'd say the last probably about 6 or 8 weeks now. And I have lost some weight, and when I do eat this way, I feel a lot better. I'm not super strict about it, especially like if we go out somewhere or on the weekends and stuff like that. But I love that Green Chef has paleo boxes because you don't even have to think about it. You just know that everything is compliant, and it's always super delicious. Okay, so I'm gonna season this lightly with salt and pepper. It smells really, really good. Give this a toss, and then I'm gonna set this aside. All right, so I've got a saute pan here, just like a medium one. I'm gonna add some olive oil to the bottom of this, and then I'm gonna chop up my zucchini and the shallots and get that added to the pan. I think I'm gonna go ahead and cut these into cubes because that I think will be easiest to eat in the salad, but that is definitely up to you. All right, my veggies are all chopped up, so I'm just gonna season these, salt and pepper, and then I am gonna saute these over medium heat until they're just tender. All right, so I'm sauteing my chicken in some olive oil, and I really like using a stainless steel skillet to cook chicken breasts in because it really gets some good color on the outside of it. So that will finish cooking, and then I'm still working on the zucchini and the shallots. All right, so I've got one of my cutting boards here because probably gonna make a little bit of a mess. We're gonna cut up, or chop up rather, the capers and the almonds together. This is gonna be the gremolata. Okay, so I've got my shallots and my zucchini all cooked up, so I'm gonna go ahead and add those in with the kale and give that another toss. All right, so I don't think I've ever made a gremolata before. Maybe I have. But either way, this is the pan I used to cook the chicken in. So I just sauteed the capers and the red peppers and the almonds in that. And then the directions say to add the vinegar. And then we're gonna add some olive oil too. So it's kind of like a dressing. Then we'll season this with salt and pepper, and then this will go over top of the chicken. All right, so the last step that we are going to do before we assemble our salads is to cut up our chicken. And I honestly, whenever I meal prep chicken breast, I always pre-cut them up before I put them in the fridge or do whatever I'm gonna do with them, because I always try to think about how I'm going to eat the item, you know, when it comes time for lunch or whatever. And especially if you are going to work, it is very hard to saw up a chicken breast while you're sitting at your desk. So I would recommend always pre-slicing everything first. You guys like my giant fork? All my regular forks are in the dishwasher. The other thing I was gonna say is if you sear your chicken breast at like pretty high heat and then let them rest for at least like 10 minutes, you will have like juicy chicken. So don't overcook it because it will keep cooking as it sits. All right, so I've got my meal prep containers here. I'm just gonna show you guys 2 because you get the idea, but I am gonna make 4 of them. So first thing that I'm gonna do is put in a serving of the kale with the zucchini and dressing and shallot, and then I'll get about 1 of the chicken breasts in here, and then a good spoonful of this gremolata. By the way, I did taste all of these things together in a bite because I wanted to tell you guys how it was, and it is freaking delicious. I don't even care that it's like paleo, vegan, keto, whatever tastes good is what I care about. I mean, it's a bonus that it's paleo, obviously. All right, and I'll just store this aioli separately in the fridge, and then when it comes time, I can drizzle a little bit more over there. But that is my Mediterranean chicken salad meal prep for the week. Thank you again, Green Chef, for sponsoring. You guys check this out. Make sure that you check out that link in the description box to get your discount. Okay, so the next thing that I'm gonna meal prep is some chili. So you guys saw me make in my last fall crock pot video, I made a white chicken chili, which was really good, but my family, fortunately, likes the regular traditional chili much better. They weren't that enamored with the white chicken chili. So I'm gonna go ahead and cook some chili this week because it is a great thing to meal prep and have ready for a weeknight. So I'm gonna cook it in my Instant Pot. I've just got 2 pounds of ground beef in here that I am sauteing up. And then along with that, basically I just go through my pantry and I pull anything out that I have on hand that will work in it. So I have a couple cans of pinto beans, some fire roasted diced tomatoes, a couple cans of San Marzano tomatoes, which I'll have to puree those if I'm going to use them, tomato sauce, and then a can of Aldi brand Rotel. I have some tomato paste I need to get used up too, so I might use that. I also end up adding a little bit of water to it to thin it out a little bit, a couple jalapenos, and then whatever seasonings you like in your chili. I have chili powder, onion powder, ground coriander, and ground cumin. Sometimes I do chopped onion, but I'm not going to tonight. My kids don't prefer that. And then salt and pepper. So I'm just going to brown this up and then start chopping up my jalapeno. Okay, so I am going to add maybe a couple of cloves, I don't know, 3 cloves of garlic to this, and then some of my chopped jalapeno. This is 2 really small jalapenos chopped up. If I was using a bigger one, I probably would have only used 1, but I did take the seeds out. Someone asked me the other day when I use garlic paste versus minced garlic versus fresh garlic. I really don't have a rhyme or reason for it. I've actually never purchased the minced garlic before. I've only purchased this garlic paste and used fresh garlic. So normally it just depends on if I feel like I have time to peel garlic and put it through my garlic press. I also added some salt and pepper to the beef. Now this is beef from a local farmer that we get a half a cow from every couple of years. And so this ends up being like 90% lean ground beef, so I normally don't have to drain it. All right, so the beef is done. I'm gonna go ahead and add some of the spices just so they can kind of toast up a little bit. I don't really measure when I make chili. If you are not accustomed to making chili on your own, what I would recommend doing is finding a recipe. I think I actually have one in my cookbook, or you can find a recipe online. Make it the first time as the recipe directs, and then, you know, adjust it to your taste. And the more and more you make it, the more you will not have to use a recipe, and you can just make it according to your taste. And you always need more chili powder than you think you're going to. So I don't know, I'm gonna add that's probably about 3 to 4 tablespoons. I always end up having to add more. Okay, so for the tomato sauce and tomatoes, I have 1 can of these fire roasted diced tomatoes, 1 can of tomato sauce. I'm gonna put 1 can of water in from that tomato sauce. Some people like a really thick chili. I like it more like a soup, so there's a tiny little can of tomato sauce. Like I said, I just use what I have on hand. Okay, and then this is a can of Rotel. Well, it's the Aldi brand of Rotel. I'm gonna stir this up. The good thing too about making chili in the Instant Pot, especially like for meal prep, is that you can let it cool and take the insert out and then just refrigerate this right in your fridge with the lid on it. And then when you're ready to, you know, heat it up later in the week, you can do that, or you can portion it out and freeze it right away, depending on what you want to do. All right, so this is 2 cans of pinto beans that I drained, but I didn't rinse them. Some people don't drain their beans when they make chili. I do drain them, but I don't rinse them just because there is some of that, you know, canning liquid left on the beans, and it does help it thicken a little bit. So I do feel like I need more tomatoes. So I'm gonna go ahead and puree these 2 cans of tomatoes, and I'll use my immersion blender and then I'll add those. All right, so here's can 2 of 2 of the tomatoes I pureed. Super quick and easy. So here is the chili. I feel like this is sort of the thickness that I like it. It's not quite, you know, it's not super soupy, but it's not like super thin either. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna give this like a little bit of taste, because I feel like it's gonna need more chili powder. Yeah, it does for sure. Tomatoes are super bland on their own, obviously. Tomato sauce. It's got a good spice level though. I'm gonna add some more salt. And you can add more too after it's done cooking. I just like to try to get it as close to seasoned as I can before I cook it. All right, I'm gonna add just a little bit more chili powder. Okay, I'm also gonna add a little bit more cumin. Okay, so this is all done for now. So what I'm gonna do is put the lid on this, set it to sealing, and then cancel. I usually use beans/chili, and that puts it on high pressure for 30 minutes. But if you are following a different recipe, use whatever. I think it's pretty hard to screw chili up in an Instant Pot. Okay, so the chili is done. It turned out really, really good. The only thing I did after I took the lid off was I tasted it. I added a little bit more salt. So I wanted to show you guys something like specifically for meal prep, but these are called super cubes, and they have them on Amazon. I can link them down below, but essentially it helps you portion out things and freeze them. And then what you can do is just pop them out one by one as you need them. They also come with like this plastic lid, so you can stack them one on top of the other. So I just put some in here. I'm gonna freeze that. I'm gonna refrigerate the rest of it, and I'm also gonna have a bowl, which is right here, with some corn chips and some cheese and some cilantro. All right, so the next recipe that we're gonna prep is more of a dessert recipe, but I wanted to make this because I was cleaning out my pantry and I found that I had a couple of jars of jam in there that I kind of want to go through. So this one is a seedless raspberry jam. So I looked online for recipes including jams, and I found this raspberry jam shortbread tart. I will link the recipe down below, but I like the idea of it because it uses a combination of regular flour and almond flour, and I'm actually going to omit the regular white sugar and substitute this baking sugar alternative by King Arthur, sort of like a keto friendly sweetener, to make it a little bit lower in sugar. So I have that along with some salt, the raspberry jam, some almond flour, some all-purpose flour. I have 8 ounces of butter that has been softened. I'm gonna use a tart pan, which this is a Wilton tart pan. I can't remember where I got this one, but I can link it down below. And then the recipe just calls for vanilla extract, but I think I really like the idea of adding almond extract as well. So I'm gonna add a little bit of that too. I thought this would be a good fall recipe too because it uses jam instead of fresh fruit. And I know always when I'm going into fall, I feel like I wanna try and use up stuff that's in my pantry. I don't know why I associate fall with that. But anyway, this baking sugar is basically, or this baking substitute is measured 1 for 1, just like regular sugar. So I'm gonna add a cup of that. And then I'm using my Danish dough whisk, which the recipe actually suggests to use one of these to beat these together. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. All right, so we're gonna add half a teaspoon of salt, and then calls for 1 teaspoon of vanilla, so I'm gonna add that. And then almond extract is really strong, but it does taste good with like shortbread type dishes, so I'm just gonna probably add like a 1/4 teaspoon of that, and then I'm gonna leak it all over. Oh well. Okay, so then I'm gonna add my regular all-purpose flour and then 3/4 of a cup of almond flour. Okay, so this dough came together really nicely. I was gonna get out my food processor or my mixer, but I decided not to, and it worked out just fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and grease my tart pan, and then we're gonna put about half of the crust mixture in there, and then the other half is actually gonna be saved for a crumble topping. So I was gonna actually use wax paper to pat this in, but I actually don't think I need it. There was like a dark thing in there. I was like, what is that? It's like a piece of an almond peel. Okay, so that was super easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop this in the oven. I have the oven set to 325, and I'm gonna bake this for 15 minutes. And then while that's baking, I'm gonna take the remaining crust mixture and pop that in the freezer so that it can chill, so that I can crumble it easier. All right, so here is our par-baked tart crust. So I'm gonna go ahead and spoon my raspberry jam on top, and we need 3/4 of a cup. So I'm just gonna eyeball it here with about 3 big spoonfuls. That should be about 3/4 of a cup. What's funny is I took this jam out of the pantry the other day and was gonna use it, and Adam saw it sitting out on the counter and then made an English muffin with it, so I had to stick it in the fridge. Now it says to kind of leave a little bit of an edge on the outside, so I don't know how even I'm gonna be able to make it, but we'll try. So we're gonna take the crust, and I basically wrapped this in wax paper, and then I just stuck it in the freezer while this was baking. And then basically we're just gonna take the rest of the dough and crumble it on the top. I'm like super excited to, to try this. All right, so I'm gonna put this back in the oven and bake it for about 25 minutes, and I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's done. All right, so doesn't this look beautiful? Here is our raspberry jam shortbread tart. This turned out way more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. So if you've never used a tart pan before, basically it has a removable bottom, so you just kind of pick it up out of there, and then you can let it cool on your cooling rack. But yeah, I'm gonna let this cool until it's probably like just like maybe room temperature, maybe just a little bit warm. And then I have some sugar-free vanilla ice cream in the freezer that we're gonna have it with. Thought it would be fun to do a fall crock pot video for you guys. I'm gonna be sharing several delicious recipes in this video. I'm going to be making a buffalo wing dip in the crock pot, as well as some smothered pork chops with apples, a new recipe that I'm trying for Spanish beef stew that turned out delicious, as well as a white chicken chili. So let's get started. So we're going to make smothered pork chops with apples, which I think is a perfect fall fall slow cooker recipe. This recipe, once again, is out of my complete slow cooker cookbook by America's Test Kitchen. So the ingredients that you'll need for this are some pork chops. The recipe specified like thin cut bone-in pork chops, but I had these really thick cut loin chops in my freezer and I want to get them used up. So I think they'll work just fine for this. I have 2 apples. We're going to be peeling those, cutting them up and sauteing them with the onions before we add it to the slow cooker. I have 1 onion, 2 tablespoons of butter. I have some herbs here, some fresh thyme, some parsley, and a dried bay leaf. I have some flour, salt and pepper, and then some Worcestershire sauce, apple cider vinegar, and some chicken broth. So I've got my chopped apples and onions in the skillet with my butter. So I've just got this over medium heat. I'm gonna saute this for about 10 minutes just until everything is soft. Okay, so my apples and onions are soft. I'm gonna go ahead and add my 2 tablespoons of flour. Just stir that around a little bit. And then I'm gonna add my chicken broth. I'm gonna make a mess. This is about 1 cup of chicken broth. Okay, so I'm just gonna stir this up until there are no lumps left and transfer this to the crock pot. So I've got my apples and onions in here. I stirred in the fresh thyme and Worcestershire sauce. I still feel like I say that wrong every single time. Who knows? All right, I'm gonna put my pork chops on top of here. It just says to kind of nestle them on the top. I need to finish seasoning those with salt and pepper. Pork chops are in. I'm gonna go ahead and put my bay leaf in there. I was wondering if I forgot the apple cider vinegar, but no, that goes in at the end. So I'm gonna put a lid on this. You can cook this on low for 8 hours. I'm actually gonna cook it on high for about 4 hours because that's what time I have today, but I'll share with you when it's done. All right, so the pork chops are done. I'm actually gonna go ahead and remove these to a pan because I'm actually prepping this meal for later in the week. So I think I'm just gonna put them in the pan and then finish the sauce in here and then just kind of pour the apples over the top. Pork chops are huge. All right, so I've got my parsley that is minced up, fresh parsley, and then I've just got a capful of apple cider vinegar because it just calls for a teaspoon. I'm gonna stir this up. I'm probably gonna give this sauce a taste just to make sure it doesn't need salt or anything, and then pour it over the pork chops. All right, so here is how the apple smothered pork chops turned out. These are so good. I think next time I would definitely try it with the bone-in chops, but they did work well with these thick cut ones. I wouldn't use boneless, like thin cut chops, because I think those would dry out too quickly, but the sauce on this is really, really good. I think this would be awesome with some mashed potatoes, which I think is how we will have it. I think you could also serve it with egg noodles. It would be really good too, but highly recommend this recipe. It turned out delicious. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to share with you guys that is one of my favorite fall crockpot recipes is buffalo chicken dip. And you guys have probably either heard of this or made this before, but this recipe is new to me. So we're going to try this and see how it works. You'll need some cooked chicken. You can use canned chicken. I've used that before for this recipe and it turns out great. You can shred a rotisserie chicken. You can cook up some chicken breast, whatever you want. I have these pre-cooked chicken breasts, so I'm just going to chop these up. You need about 2 cups of that, about 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese. Optional, you can add blue cheese to this. Adam doesn't like that, so I'm not going to add that. You also need 2 packages of cream cheese. I'm using the 1/3 less fat, some sour cream, some ranch dressing, some Frank's Red Hot, and then here are my tiny little green onions that I'm regrowing in the fridge, but we're just going to add those at the end to kind of top it. So I'm going to save those for later. So the main difference with this recipe than the ones that I've made before for buffalo chicken dip is that this one is sort of a layered dip in the crock pot. So what I have in here is my 2 blocks of cream cheese that I softened, and then I'm going to add 1/2 cup of ranch dressing. I suppose also you could use blue cheese dressing if you wanted to, and then 1/2 cup of sour cream. And this is also the step in which you would add the crumble blue cheese if you're going to use that. But the sour cream is also an extra addition that I haven't ever used before. I was going to get the mixer out, but I'm going to see if I can kind of use my elbow grease to stir this together. All right, I'm not about to mix this up with my hands, so I'm going to use my hand mixer. Okay, so here's what that mixture looks like. Much easier to use a mixer. So I don't typically like to use crock pot liners. Don't ask me why, it's not my thing, I don't know. But I am gonna use one with this recipe because if you have ever made the buffalo chicken dip in a crock pot, you know that it can get very difficult to clean out of there, even if you spray it. So we're just gonna bite the bullet and use this one. So I'm gonna put this layer in the bottom, and this is one of my smaller crock pots. I'm not exactly sure the size. I think it's a 3-quart maybe. I would not, unless you're gonna double this recipe, use a larger slow cooker, just because your layer on the bottom is gonna be too thin and it's probably gonna burn. Okay. And by the way, I'll have all of these recipes typed out down below or linked along with a shopping list. Okay, so the next thing that I'm gonna do is put the chicken layer on. So it looks like, well, I need about 2 cups of shredded chicken or cooked chicken. So I'm gonna need about 3 chicken breasts, it looks like. So I'm gonna add that in next and get this other one chopped up. One thing I was gonna mention, which I think I've shared this before in my grocery hauls, but Walmart does sell pre-shredded rotisserie chicken now, and it's actually really good. I've purchased that kind before, and then they also have a fajita seasoned one and a barbecue seasoned one. It's super convenient, especially if you have kids like mine who want to fix stuff for themselves. Then they kind of just warm it up in a tortilla, quick barbecue chicken wrap. So I've got this crock pot set on low, and it says it's going to cook for about 3 hours. So I'm going to add in the other cup of chicken, just kind of try and distribute that as evenly as possible. And then I've got half a cup of buffalo wing sauce. I like the Frank's Red Hot, but you can use any kind you want. I'm going to drizzle that over. And then the last step is just to put the cheese on. All right, so I added 1 cup of cheese to the top of that. So we're gonna shut this. And then again, this is on low. This crock pot it's not my favorite because it has like these pre-settings and you can only do it for like certain increments. But we're gonna let this go on high for 3 hours and then we'll see what it looks like. And usually I serve this with tortilla chips and chicken and a biscuit crackers. All right, so our dip is done. I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like. I went ahead and followed the recipe and I topped it with some extra cheese and some green onions. It smells really good. I'm trying to decide whether I want to mix it up or not because I feel like it kind of needs to be mixed up to be like evenly distributed. But anyway, I'm going to plate it up and then I will taste it and I'll tell you what it's like. Okay, so I put some of this into a bowl and I tasted it and it's really good. I would definitely recommend this recipe. The difference to me was the addition of the sour cream, and I feel like it actually makes it a lot better. So normally you would serve this with tortilla chips, or we also have it a lot of times with chicken and a biscuit crackers, which if you haven't tried it yet, definitely do. But I think this makes perfect addition to like your football party or anything. And I would recommend adding more green onions than I did because I think that would enhance the flavor. I just didn't have enough on hand. So the next recipe that I'm going to share in this fall crockpot video is a Spanish beef and red pepper stew. So I have made beef stew a lot, but I've never used this recipe, so I'm excited to try it. This is the cookbook I'm using for this particular recipe. It's Milk Street Fast and Slow. I'll link it down below. I'll also have all of the recipes and shopping list linked down below as well. This particular cookbook actually is made for an instant pot, and basically you can either cook things fast or slow. I'm going to kind of modify this so that I can make it in a crock pot, but here are the ingredients that you'll need. I have some beef stew meat. This is about 2 to 3 pounds. Some salt and pepper, some roasted red bell peppers, about 1/2 cup of those, some fresh rosemary, 1 tomato. The recipe calls for a shallot. I don't have that on hand, so I'm gonna use red onion, 10 cloves of garlic, some lemon, 2 tablespoons of flour, some sweet paprika, olive oil, and then some prosciutto. Okay, so I chopped up my tomato and seeded that. I sliced the red onion. I chopped up the garlic. So I tried something different with my garlic. I've seen before where people put the garlic cloves in a mason jar and shake it up and it peels the garlic. That did not work for me. I have a garlic peeler that's like a little, like a rubber tube, and you roll the garlic in there. That works really well. It's dirty right now, so that's why I didn't use it. But anyway, I also cut up the prosciutto. If you've never cut prosciutto before, it can be kind of difficult to cut through, so make sure you have a really sharp knife. So we're gonna go ahead and saute these ingredients together. I've just got some olive oil in this pan. So we're just gonna saute this for about 5 minutes until everything gets soft. What I was gonna say is the thing I really like about using some of these different slow cooker cookbooks is that they really use like fresh ingredients, like fresh whole food. I mean, I can get on board with a can of cream of chicken soup any day, but sometimes I feel like that's a lot of what some of these like slow cooker recipes are, is just like dumping cans into a slow cooker, which is totally fine. I mean, I have done that many a time myself, but I've really been enjoying using some of these cookbooks to cook different things and just like use fresh whole ingredients. So to this, I'm gonna add my minced fresh rosemary. I think if you didn't want to purchase fresh rosemary, because I know herbs can be expensive, definitely just use dried. And then I'm gonna stir in some paprika as well. So since I'm adapting this to a slow cooker rather than an Instant Pot, obviously the Instant Pot has the saute function. So at the end, it directs you to whisk the flour in with some of the drippings and then turn it back up, you know, so that you can thicken it. My crock pot's not going to be able to do that, so I'm just going to go ahead and add flour now, and that should be fine. It will obviously thicken as it cooks. All right, so I added the roasted red peppers also and transferred it to the slow cooker. I've got my beef here. I salted and peppered that really well. So now the only thing left to do is just kind of stir this together and turn it on. I'm gonna cook this on high for about 4 to 5 hours. You could also cook it on low for 9 to 10 hours. All right, so here is our beef stew. After it's done cooking, the beef is super tender. I squeezed in the lemon juice and I went ahead and boiled up just some plain egg noodles and tossed those with butter. You could also have this with mashed potatoes or rice. So I'm gonna plate this up and show you guys what it looks like. All right, so here's what this looks like plated up. I definitely recommend this recipe. It is a lot more flavorful than like a traditional beef stew because of like the paprika and all the other seasonings that are in there. So definitely give this a try. I just have it on some egg noodles and I dusted a little bit of dried parsley on the top. Yum. Okay, so we're gonna make some white chicken chili. I always feel like obviously chili is a perfect fall recipe. However, I think sometimes some of us get tired, I know I do, of just making regular chili. So I'm gonna use my America's Test Kitchen, the complete slow cooker cookbook. I'll link this down below. I really like this cookbook, and I'm gonna make this white chicken chili. So this has white beans in it and chicken, and it's sort of a fresher take on like a ground beef chili. One thing that I actually forgot that I need to run to the store and grab is some fresh cilantro. I thought that I threw it in my cart and I can't find it anywhere. Don't you hate when that happens? So this really has minimal ingredients. What you'll need is some extra virgin olive oil, some garlic. I have some coriander and some cumin, 2 cans of white kidney beans or cannellini beans, 1 can of either white or yellow hominy, some pickled jalapenos, some fresh jalapenos, onion, salt and pepper, about 3. The recipe calls for chicken thighs, but I already have these chicken breasts thawed out, so that's what I'm gonna use for this. And then 3 cups of chicken broth. I'm gonna reconstitute my own. I'm just using this Better Than Bouillon. This is actually a vegetarian chicken base, but it's really good anyway. So the first thing that we're actually gonna do is puree some chicken broth along with some rinsed and drained hominy to thicken the soup. In my blender container, I have 2 cups of water and then 2 teaspoons of the chicken base. I'm gonna put in this hominy. It's 1 can that I rinsed and drained. Okay, I'm just using my NutriBullet, so hopefully this is okay. I didn't want to dirty my big blender. Okay, so this is what that looks like pureed. I'm just gonna put that into the slow cooker. That's gonna become part of the soup base. The recipe says that it will help thicken the soup and also give it kind of like a corn flavor. All right, so here's my chicken. I took it out of the package, I pat it dry, seasoned it with salt and pepper, and I've got a nonstick skillet over here just heated with a little bit of olive oil. So I've said this before and I'll say it again. Sometimes, you know, I always feel like America's Test Kitchen recipes are really good. Sometimes I just feel like they're a little bit fussy, but I'm gonna follow the recipe anyway. So normally, you know, I would probably just put this chicken in the slow cooker with the soup and, you know, shred it when it was done and everything would be fine. But the recipe is directing me to brown it first. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Once it's brown, I'm gonna transfer it to the slow cooker. Obviously, I'm not cooking it through. I'm just getting a little bit of color on it. And while that is cooking, I'm gonna chop up my veggies. So onion and jalapeno. All right, so I've got my onions and my jalapenos sauteing in the pan that I removed the chicken from. So I'm gonna add my garlic. Always add that last so that you don't want it to burn. About 6 cloves worth. I usually just eyeball that. And then in this bowl right here, I have my cumin and my coriander. So I'm just gonna also add that and let the spices toast a little bit. Again, I feel like if you were strapped for time, you could just add this all to the slow cooker and cook it together, but I'm gonna follow the recipe. Okay, and then this is the remaining 1 cup of chicken broth I have. So I'm gonna add that to the skillet just to make sure that I can get all the bits off the bottom. And then I'm gonna add this to the slow cooker with the chicken and the hominy puree. So I've got everything in there. I've got my chicken and the broth and the veggies and the seasonings. I'm gonna add my 2 cans of cannellini beans that I've rinsed. If you can't find those, just add any kind of white bean, or you could even add regular beans if you wanted to. I guess the good thing about adding everything to here hot is that it's gonna come to temperature faster. So the recipe directs to cook this on low for 4 to 5 hours, but I don't have that long. I just have like maybe 2.5 hours before dinner. So I'm just gonna put it on high and we'll let that cook until the chicken is tender. All right, so our chicken is finished cooking and I'm gonna go ahead and just remove the chicken breasts to a cutting board and let them cool down slightly, and then I'll go ahead and shred the meat and put it back into the soup. Okay, so I stirred my chicken into the soup and I'm gonna go ahead and add my cilantro. You wanna wait till the end to add that because it's gonna lose a lot of its flavor if you cook it in the broth. I'm gonna give this a stir and then I'm just gonna take out a spoonful and like a very small spoonful and stick it in a bowl, let it cool, and I'm gonna taste it and see what it needs. If it needs more chicken broth, more salt, more pepper, more spice, whatever. Okay, so I did add some extra salt to the white chicken chili. I thought that it needed it. And after I served the kids theirs, I went ahead and added some of the juice from this jalapeno pickled pepper jar because I thought that it could use a little bit more spice. Obviously you can add more or less depending on, you know, what you want. I'm gonna go ahead and dish this up and show you what it looks like. It's delicious. All right, so here is our completed white chicken chili. This turned out so good. I definitely recommend this recipe for fall. It's perfect for chili nights or if you have a football game. If you're gonna feed a crowd, I would definitely double it, but we have the soup in there. Super simple ingredients. On the top, I added some chopped red onion, some cilantro, a little bit of pepper jack cheese, and 1 jalapeno. You could add crackers to this or tortilla chips would be really good. Crushed up, sour cream, avocado, kind of the sky's the limit, but this is definitely a keeper and I will definitely be making this at some point again. Okay, so the next pantry recipe I'm going to share with you out of the cookbook is the slow cooker creamy chicken chili, and this is honestly one of my favorite recipes in the book, so if you haven't tried it, definitely do so. So for this recipe, you'll need some chicken breasts. I just have 2 chicken breasts in the bottom of my slow cooker, and these are mostly thawed. They might be still a little bit frozen in the middle, but that's fine. They'll cook as the chili cooks. And then you'll need 1 can of pinto beans, 1 can of petite diced tomatoes, a can of corn, salt and pepper of course, and then cumin, dill weed, and chili powder. I'm also going to use some garlic paste, some sriracha, and then this is chicken stock or chicken broth. All the recipes in the cookbook call for vegetable broth or stock, but that was just because we wanted to make more of the recipes vegetarian. So for this particular recipe, you can use either chicken broth or vegetable broth, and I'm using chicken. I just have some of that chicken base. It's in my refrigerator. I just reconstituted it with some warm water. Okay, so I'm gonna squeeze in just about the equivalent of 2 cloves of garlic, and then I'll pour in the chicken broth. This recipe is really easy because you obviously just dump everything into the slow cooker, cook it, and then when it's done, we'll shred the chicken and put it back in. I'm gonna put in 1 teaspoon of hot sauce. Okay, so I'm gonna put in my 1 can of diced tomatoes. You do not need to drain those. 1 can of corn. You do not need to drain that. And then I did go ahead and drain off most of the liquid on the pinto beans. Okay, so just to make sure that all of this is combined, I'm gonna give it a little bit of a stir. And then I have all of my spices in this bowl, so I'm just gonna put those in, stir. This is a really easy freezer meal too, if you wanted to like combine everything in a Ziploc bag and then freeze it. really good that way too. And then the last ingredient is just 1 block of cream cheese. You could use low fat or regular, and then obviously this is gonna melt and while it cooks, and that is what will give this chicken chili like the creamy texture. It's really good. So I'm gonna put the lid on, and then I'm gonna cook this on high for 4 hours. Alternatively, you could cook it on low for 8 to 10, but basically we're just gonna cook it until the chicken is cooked through and we can shred it easily. All right, so 4 hours are up and the chicken is cooked. So at this point, all you need to do is remove the chicken from the slow cooker, and then we'll wait till that cools a little bit so we can shred it. And then I'm gonna get a whisk and combine the cream cheese with the rest of the mixture. So at first, this is probably gonna seem like it won't combine, but it will if you kind of sit here and whisk it a little bit. And then when I add the chicken back in, I'm also gonna add about a cup of shredded cheddar cheese. You could also use pepper jack, but that'll kind of help bring everything together too. And then at that point, you can taste it. If you think it needs more salt or more spice, you can add whatever you think it needs. But this is really delicious and super easy. We normally eat it with like crushed up tortilla chips on top and cilantro, sour cream, extra cheese. You could also eat it with Fritos. It's really, really good. Okay, so you can see how easy this chicken is shredding, and you just kind of want to shred it up into bite-sized pieces. And 2 chicken breasts will really go a long way, especially in a dish like this. So it's a good way to stretch your protein also. I've also seen people shred their chicken with a stand mixer. I don't want to necessarily dirty mine just to do this, but if you had a large batch, you could definitely do that. All right, so I put the chicken back in there, and I'm gonna add, you can if you want, yeah. I'm gonna add about a cup of shredded cheddar cheese, and then I'm just gonna kind of stir this and let the cheese melt. So at this point, you can put this on keep warm. We're actually gonna give this to Adam's parents, so I'm gonna turn it off. That way it will cool a little bit so I can pack it up into some containers. So I thought I would share with you guys what this soup looks like when it's plated up. So I just usually top this with cheese and tortilla chips, or I'm using Fritos and some sour cream and cilantro. It's really, really good, so definitely try it. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be making the honey soy salmon burgers, and this is on page 89 of the cookbook. These are so easy and so tasty, and I always have the ingredients on hand because I always have salmon in my freezer. So the ingredients you'll need, and I'm going to cut this recipe in half because there's only 2 of us that really like salmon enough to eat these here. If we're gonna make the whole recipe, you'll want 1 pound of salmon, but I have about a half a pound that I've cubed up. I have some salt and pepper. I also have some garlic, some soy sauce. You also need some lime juice, an egg, and some panko breadcrumbs. And then this is the perfect recipe to use my Misen stainless skillet for, because with these soy honey salmon burgers, you're gonna get a really great crust on them. And a pan like this is great for something like that because it's a stainless steel skillet. You're going to be able to get that awesome sear on the meat that you wouldn't be able to get with, you know, a nonstick skillet or any other type of skillet. I have been cooking with this stainless steel pan for months and months now. I think probably almost 6 months, and I can honestly say that it's one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. If you guys want to get your own, you can check out the link in the description box below. You can get 20% off your first order. Check out the link and use promo code JEN for 20% off. Another great thing that this skillet is good for is if you are making steak and you want to go from stovetop to oven, you can do that with this pan because it is oven safe up to 500 degrees. So you can get that really good hot sear on your steak, you know, sear the outside of it and then slide it into the oven. So definitely recommend this. Again, there'll be a link down below. You can use code JEN to get 20% off. So the first thing that I'm going to do is put my salmon into the food processor. You do not necessarily have to have a food processor to make this recipe, but if you have one, I would recommend it. I didn't realize that was on. But basically, you just want to chop up the salmon just like that. Actually, I don't even think I'm gonna have to do it, but one more pulse maybe. Yeah. So, you know, you can chop up your salmon and it's not going to hold together quite as well, but you know, you can make it work you can make anything work in the kitchen, right? But if you do have a food processor, obviously you just want to kind of grind it up so it's in a little bit of a paste. So since the recipe calls for 1 egg, to cut that in half, I just decided to use the egg white and not the yolk. And then I'm gonna need about 1.5 cloves of garlic. And then in this measuring cup, I have 1 tablespoon of soy sauce and the juice of half a lime. I'm just gonna add a tiny bit of salt. You don't need that much because this is obviously has soy sauce in it, and soy sauce is salty. And then just a tiny bit of cayenne. Oh, I guess that may have been more than a tiny bit. Whoops. And then I have 1/2 cup of panko breadcrumb. You can adjust the panko depending on how much fish that you have, and if you feel like, you know, it's a little bit wet and it needs more. But I'm just gonna stir this together. When I make a mixture like this, I normally like to use a fork because I feel like it makes the dish lighter. You know, like I'm not overworking it so much. So I'm just gonna get this combined. Okay, so I'm gonna put this over medium high heat, and then I'm gonna pour in
right here,
yeah, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then I have actually the salmon mixture in the fridge to chill a little bit.
Can I help with you, please?
I have it in the fridge to chill a little bit, and then we'll form it into patties. Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so I have my salmon mixture here. I'm just gonna get these into the pan. It's gonna smoke and splatter just a little bit because I have it turned up, but that's what we want to get that good sear.
Ooh.
Okay, so we have our salmon burgers here. I'm gonna go ahead and flip these. You wanna cook them for about 4 minutes per side to see that awesome crust on there. And they actually are holding together really, really well. I apologize because I have the exhaust fan on. This is a glaze that I made out of soy sauce and honey and a little bit of garlic. So we're just gonna kind of baste this over the burgers, and then we'll flip them and baste them when they're cooked through. All right, so here are our honey soy salmon burgers. You can see the beautiful crust that those got in that mise-en pan. So I'm just gonna let these rest for probably about 5 minutes, and then I'll show you how I like to serve these. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of ways that you could eat this salmon burger. You could put it on a bun, you could eat it on rice. Personally, I like to have it on like a bed of greens. And then I just made a little bit of sriracha mayo, which is just like a couple tablespoons of mayo with a couple squirts of sriracha. Mix it together to your taste. And the combination of that with the salmon burger kind of reminds me of sushi, you know, when they put the spicy mayo on the sushi, and it's really good. So definitely try this recipe. Like I said, if you have salmon, you probably have all of the other ingredients too. And it's a nice twist on just your standard like baked or broiled salmon. So definitely give it a try, and don't forget to check out the link for Mise-en below so you guys can get 20% off that stainless skillet. Okay, so tonight for dinner, we're gonna be making the shrimp scampi recipe on page 83. And then to go along with that, I'm also going to make a pasta alfredo. My kids are kind of so-so on shrimp scampi. They will eat a little bit of it, but I know they like alfredo sauce, so I'm gonna make this on the side. And then I'm going to either do a veggie or a salad, and I'm going to heat up some bread as well. Okay, so here are the ingredients that you'll need for the shrimp scampi. I always keep shrimp in the freezer. That's actually one of the ingredients in the pantry cookbook. If you want more information about how the cookbook is laid out, I have a video all about that. I can link it down below. But shrimp is an item that is super easy and quick to thaw out, and it's very quick cooking. So I have about 1.5 pounds of shrimp that I have basically just thawed out and rinsed, and I have it drying on a paper towel. I have a cup of vegetable broth. I've used this Better Than Bouillon vegetable base and just reconstituted it in some very hot water. All of the recipes in the cookbook can be used with either chicken or vegetable broth. The reason why they are all written with vegetable broth is so that there are more vegetarian dishes in the cookbook. However, if you want to substitute chicken broth, you could totally do that as well. I'm going to be combining that with some rice wine vinegar, and the combination of this is going to be a substitute for wine. I have some olive oil, some butter. I have some parsley. This is actually an extra and that is not in the cookbook. However, if do have some fresh parsley you can sprinkle on top. It's really delicious. If you don't have it, no big deal. I have 4 cloves of garlic, some grated Parmesan cheese. You need a 1/4 cup of this, a little bit in the bottom of there, so I'm gonna go ahead and use that, and some salt and pepper. And then for the side, I'm gonna use some penne just because that's what I have in my pantry. You can use any type of pasta. And then I just have a pot of water coming to a boil back there. So for the Alfredo sauce, traditional Alfredo sauce uses heavy cream and butter and Parmesan cheese, but I am actually going to use regular milk and then just half a package of cream cheese and then a little bit of butter. So I have half a stick of butter in here melted. I'm gonna put in the equivalent of 2 cloves of garlic, put in less or more depending on how garlicky you want your Alfredo sauce. I'm just gonna stir this around in the butter, kind of give it a chance to brew a little bit, and then I will add 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Again, not a traditional Alfredo recipe, but I was trying to keep it with the spirit of pantry cooking, and heavy cream is not one of those things that I always keep on hand, and so I wanted this to be obviously really accessible. And then we're gonna add half a teaspoon of salt, and you can obviously taste it at the end and add more if you like. I'm gonna let this cook for just about 30 seconds. Okay, so I have 4 ounces of plain cream cheese in here. If you wanted to, you could definitely use low-fat cream cheese as well, but I am going to let this cook down. I did not, unfortunately, let my cream cheese soften before I put it in here. That would be ideal, but you just wanna make sure this doesn't burn. So I'm just gonna let this cook down and the cream cheese melt, and then I'll add my milk. Okay, so we're gonna add our milk. I'm just adding 2 cups of whole milk. You can use whatever you have on hand. I tested all of the recipes in the cookbook with whole milk, so I think that's what it calls for, but obviously you can substitute. You might have a thinner sauce or something like that, but you may be able to add a little bit more flour to thicken it up. So I'm just gonna whisk this over like medium-low heat, just to make sure that it doesn't get clumpy or stick to the bottom. And then I'm also going to add 1.5 cups of Parmesan cheese. I'm just using a mixture of whatever I have in my fridge, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of pepper as well. All right, so here's my pasta. I'm gonna add penne, but again, you can use whatever type of pasta that you want. And I'll stir this around, and then I'll keep an eye on the Alfredo, and then we'll start the shrimp. That'll be the last thing we do since it cooks so quick. So I decided instead of a salad, I'm just gonna make this broccoli. I get this from Costco. It is actually really good and super convenient to make because you can steam it right in the bag. So normally I put this in for 5 minutes, and then I just toss it with some salt and pepper. And then if you guys have never seen these bread loaves from the Essential Baking Company, they're actually shelf stable and they're really good. All you have to do is take them out of the package and then bake them in like a 425-degree oven for 10 minutes. They come out super crusty and delicious, so I'm gonna throw this in the oven too. Okay, so the Alfredo sauce is done. It is delicious. Turned out super creamy and rich. I did add just a little bit of pepper to it. Depending on the type of cheese you use, you probably will have to adjust seasoning. I mean, you can use any type of Parmesan cheese you have on hand. You can even use like the shaky cheese in the green can, whatever. Just add salt or pepper. And also, if you use like a really strong Parmesan cheese, another suggestion I have is to add just a tiny sprinkle of sugar to it if you find that the Parmesan is too strong. It just depends on how you like it to taste. So I just have this on warm, and then I have my pasta here that is almost done cooking. And then in this pan over here, I have 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm just sauteing, some garlic. And then I'm gonna add in my shrimp that I seasoned with just some salt and pepper while I make a mess. I need to clean my stove anyway, so pardon me. Okay, and then I'm gonna salt and pepper the other side as well. Okay, so I wish you guys could smell this because it smells delicious. The key to really good shrimp scampi is the garlic. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour in my combination of veggie broth and vinegar, and I'm just gonna let that simmer for maybe about a minute until it reduces a little bit, and then I'm gonna sprinkle some Parmesan cheese over the top, and it's all done. Oh my gosh, this is perfection. Definitely taste your food, you guys. So I tasted it and it's perfect. I tasted a little bit of the broth too. So with shrimp scampi, you can really kind of serve this in like a ramekin or a shallow bowl, and you can use some like crusty bread to like sop up the goodness, or you can serve it with pasta. Like I said, we're kind of gonna have it on the side of our Alfredo tonight, but yes, definitely delicious. Again, the parsley is optional, strongly encouraged. However, if you don't have it, don't worry about it. You can also just sprinkle some dried parsley on the top. It's actually just really kind of for looks too. Okay, so here is the pasta and the Alfredo sauce. It looks delicious. And then I put the bread in the bowl here with a towel over it. And then we've got our broccoli and then the shrimp scampi. So let me fix the plate and then I'll share that with you. All right, here's tonight's pantry meal exclusively from my cookbook. Shrimp scampi and Alfredo sauce, broccoli, bread. So tonight I am making the spaghetti pizza with pepperoni, which is on page 52 of the cookbook. So I've got some boiling water here and I did salt it, and I'm gonna add 8 ounces of spaghetti, which is half of a regular package, and then just boil this for about 8 to 10 minutes until it's just tender. So the spaghetti is done now, and I am going to drain it and then rinse it with cold water. We're gonna end up mixing the spaghetti with some milk and egg and Parmesan cheese and some mozzarella, so make sure that you don't skip the step of rinsing it in cool water. You want it to be cool so that it doesn't, like, you know, scramble the egg when you mix it together. I've got a big bowl here and I've got 1 egg cracked in there. I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of Parmesan cheese. I think that Adam's organizing the mug cabinet, which is a necessity right now. Anyway, I think the cheese in the can works just fine for this application. Okay, I also put some mozzarella cheese in there, and I'm gonna add 1/4 cup of milk, or 1/3 cup milk. In this recipe, the spaghetti ends up kind of being like the crust for the pizza, so it's kind of unique in that way. And the only other thing I'm going to add is some salt, pepper, and some crushed garlic. Okay, so I mixed my cooked and cooled spaghetti in. I seasoned it with a little bit of salt and pepper, and I have a casserole dish over here that's just greased with cooking spray. So I'm going to spread the spaghetti layer out in there, and then I have this marinara sauce. This was in the freezer, so I just thawed it out in the refrigerator, and that's what we're going to use for topping it. Okay, I lied. I'm not going to put the sauce on yet. I have to cook the crust first. My brain is fried. Okay, so I'm going to put this into the oven. It's at 425, and I'm just going to bake that for about 15 minutes, and then we'll take it out and top it. Okay, so I took the spaghetti out and covered it with the marinara sauce, and then I'm just going to sprinkle some cheese on top. And then we'll top it with some pepperoni and it'll go back in the oven. So you can top this with anything that you want. I'm just gonna do pepperoni today, but you can put peppers or olives or onions or mushrooms or whatever you normally put on top of your pizza. And then you can also mix the marinara sauce with sausage too, or hamburger. There's a recipe riff in there for that. So this is gonna bake for, the recipe says 25 minutes. I'm gonna do 20 because my oven kind of runs hot sometimes, and then we'll check it. All right, so here's how it turned out. Really good. So a couple of tips for you if you make this recipe. Number one, like any casserole, you want to let it sit in the casserole dish for maybe about 5 to 10 minutes before you cut into it. Otherwise, it's kind of like lasagna. You know, it's hot and melty and it kind of runs all over the plate. Another thing I would say is that the recipe in the book calls to make the marinara sauce homemade, which there's a recipe in the book for that. Obviously, you don't have to do that, but the marinara sauce I used was a little bit watery, so I would definitely make sure next time that I didn't do that. But if you use jarred marinara sauce, it will work just fine too. Anyway, it's delicious. To me, it tastes like a cross between pizza and lasagna and spaghetti, and it's much easier than lasagna, and it's a spaghetti dish that you can prep ahead of time too, which is really awesome. And then we're just having it with some green beans. All right, so in tonight's episode of Pantry Cooking, we are making the Cajun inspired beans and rice on page 63. So for this recipe, you'll need some garlic, some onion, some smoked beef sausage, or you can use turkey sausage or andouille or whatever you'd like. I had this in my freezer and wanted to get it used up, so I thawed it out. I'm going to use this Niman Ranch andouille sausage. I do have a red bell pepper. It does say in here that you can add peppers or celery to your dish if you have it, and since I have a red pepper, I'm going to go ahead and add that. You will need salt, pepper, olive oil, some paprika, cayenne, Italian seasoning, some vegetable stock. You could also use chicken stock, and then 2 cans of pinto beans. And then then this recipe calls for cooked rice for serving. I actually have some frozen rice from Trader Joe's, and I'm trying to get my freezers cleaned out a little bit, so I'm just going to heat up some of that. And then I'm also going to make some biscuits on the side, because biscuits and beans and rice remind me of Popeyes, but we don't really have one around here, so this is the next best thing. So I'm gonna get these biscuits in the oven, then we'll get started on the beans. So I've got my big skillet out here. I'm just gonna put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in here, get that heated up over about medium heat, and then I'm gonna chop up my onion and pepper. I've got my onion and my pepper in here, and I'm just going to saute this for about 4 minutes until it starts to soften. And then I have my andouille here. I'm going to slice this up and crush my garlic and give that into the pan. This is already fully cooked, so you don't need to worry about cooking it through. Okay, so we're getting some good brown bits on the bottom of the pan, so I'm going to go ahead and pour in the vegetable stock. And then I'm going to measure out the spices and put those in. So salt, pepper, cayenne, Italian pepper, and paprika. And obviously you can adjust these according to your taste. More or less cayenne if you like it more or less spicy. I'm going to start with a little bit less cayenne because the original recipe just called for regular beef sausage. And since I used andouille, it's a little bit more spicy. I've got my spices in here. I'm going to add those. Then I drained the 2 cans of beans. So I'm going to add these. I did not rinse them because the residual kind of liquid on the beans will help thicken this up a little bit. So now this is done. What I'm going to do is cover it a little bit. I'm going to cover it slightly so it's vented a little bit and simmer this for about 20 minutes until everything thickens up. All right, so I simmered this for almost 20 minutes. And as you can see, it thickened up. I gave it a taste. I did think it was a tad salty, which is probably okay because I'm serving it with plain rice, but I did add just a smidge of water to it, kind of tone it down a little bit. I think with this particular recipe, it really depends on the sausage you use. And obviously if the sausage you use is salty, you should cut back on the salt in the recipe, which is what I should have done, but it's fine. It's delicious. It's nice and spicy. So I'm going to serve this on some rice with biscuits on the side. All right, just like Popeyes, only better. Cajun beans and rice with biscuits. Yum. Tonight, I'm going to make a pumpkin roll cake. So let's get this fall candle lit and get some fall baking started. I wanted to show you guys how to make one of the Libby's recipe pumpkin roll cake. It's been a while since I've made one. So here's what you need. You need flour and powdered sugar, also some vanilla, some pureed pumpkin, 3 eggs, some salt, cinnamon, ground cloves, baking powder, baking soda, some cream cheese, butter, and some regular sugar. I'm using the 1/3 less fat cream cheese. And then I just have a 15 by 10 jelly roll pan here. I'm greasing that with some Baker's Joy spray. And then you do want to line this pan with wax paper. This is literally the only time you want to put wax paper in the oven. Normally you don't want to do that, but for this particular recipe it does work. It's really only in the oven for like 12 or 13 minutes. So I prepared my pan, and then I'm going to go ahead and make the pumpkin cake batter. So I added some eggs to a bowl, and I'm going to add some sugar to that as well. I used a combination of regular sugar and Lakanto monk fruit sweetener in this recipe, just because I wanted to cut down on the calories a little bit. I'm also adding my canned pumpkin. This recipe doesn't quite call for one can of pumpkin, so I just fed the leftover to my dogs. I added the leavening agents along with the spices and the salt, and then I'm going to add 3/4 cup of flour and give that a mix. Once the batter is all mixed together, you want to go ahead and pour it into your prepared pan. I also forgot to mention that I greased the top of the wax paper as well. And then just go ahead and spread that out with a spatula. The layer is going to seem quite thin, but it will bake and puff up a little bit. So just make sure that you try to spread it to the edges as evenly as you can. And then when that comes out of the oven, go ahead and prepare your tea towel. So I have a tea towel that I'm going to dust with powdered sugar. I'm going to flip my cake out onto the towel, and then you want to carefully peel off the waxed paper just being careful not to tear anything. You can see how easily that it comes off as long as you grease it very well. And then what you want to do is, while the cake is still warm, roll it up in the tea towel that's covered with that powdered sugar. And the rationale behind this is that you're rolling the cake while it's still warm and flexible, and then you're going to put it on a cooling rack while it's still warm so that it can cool. And then when it's completely cool, we'll unroll it and add the frosting. So for the frosting, I'm adding some butter, some 1/3 less fat cream cheese, and then I'm using a combination of regular powdered sugar and the monk fruit powdered sugar. I'm going to add some vanilla, and then I'll just go ahead and beat that up with my stand mixer. Make sure that your butter and your cream cheese is definitely at room temperature. That will make your job a lot easier when you're combining the frosting. And I personally really can't tell the difference when I make cream cheese frosting with the lower fat cream cheese. I think it tastes just fine. So as you can see, my cake ripped a little bit, but it's totally fine. You know, don't worry if things aren't perfect. They're probably still going to taste good, and that's all that matters. So I went ahead and dumped my frosting out onto the cooled cake, and then I'm just going to use an offset spatula to spread that out, and you do want to make sure that you spread it all the way to the edges. Since we're going to roll this cake back up and put it in the refrigerator and it will have time to set, it's really not that big of a deal if it rips in a couple of places, especially towards the inside of the roll, because the idea is that that will get rolled up and then you won't be able to kind of see those rips in it. But I'm going to go ahead and just spread this out in as even of a layer as I can. And then once you have it all spread out, you just want to roll it up the same way that it was rolled up before. And mine stuck a little bit to the towel. I feel like the last time I made this, it did not stick to the towel. So I'm wondering if I maybe just didn't wait until it was quite cool enough, but I still made it work. You know, whatever. We're the queen of making it work around here. So as you can see, yes, some of my cake is sticking to the towel. That's fine. I rolled it up as best I could, and then I put out a layer of plastic wrap, and then I'm going to go ahead and roll the cake onto that and just roll that tightly up in a couple sheets of plastic wrap. And then this will go in the fridge for at least a couple hours. Here's what it looks like when it comes out. You can see that it's still very pretty, even though you can see where it was ripped there on the side. Go ahead and dust it with some additional powdered sugar. And then once you cut it, you see that you have this like pretty sort of like Swiss roll cake type looking design. It's so pretty and so impressive, and the best part is it tastes really good. So I'll link this recipe down below, and I hope you guys try it. It's really delicious. Today I have got some awesome fall Instant Pot meal ideas for you today. I'm going to be making 3 main dishes in the Instant Pot along with a side dish and a dessert. You are not going to want to miss this, so let's get started. We are making this recipe out of the Instant Loss on a Budget cookbook, which I'll link down below. It is the best vegetable minestrone soup, which I thought was the perfect fall recipe for the Instant Pot. So let me share with you the ingredients. So first, I've got some nutritional yeast. Baby spinach, we'll need about 4 cups of that, some onion, celery, mixed vegetables. I'm going to use some peas and some squash and some zucchini. I have 4 garlic cloves. In here, I have a mixture of spices. I've got salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, dried parsley, dried basil, dried oregano, and I think that's it. I've got some sun-dried tomatoes that I'm going to chop and add in. You'll need some beans. I have dark red kidney beans and cannellini beans, about 4 cups of water, 1 cup of vegetable broth, and about 1 cup of fusilli pasta. You can use whatever type of pasta you like. If you're gluten-free, you can use that or just regular pasta. I also forgot to mention that you will need 1 can of diced tomatoes and some tomato paste. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start chopping up some of these veggies to get into the Instant Pot for this soup. So essentially I'm gonna start chopping the things that take the longest to cook, right? So onion and celery first. I'm gonna chop about 2 stalks of celery. I have this celery already washed and kind of prepped in my fridge. And when I cut celery, I prefer to cut it into smaller dice, just because that's how I like it, but you can chop it however you like. Got 4 cloves of garlic, and I'm going to use my garlic press to give these a crush or a mince, whatever you want to call it. My favorite way to process garlic. And then I'll pop this into the Instant Pot along with the onions and the celery. Okay, so this recipe is really flexible in that you can use, you know, pretty much any type of vegetables that you want. I have some zucchini and squash on hand, so I'm gonna go ahead and chop those into like bite-sized pieces and use those, but you could also use frozen mixed vegetables. You could use potatoes, carrots, corn, whatever you have on hand. Okay, I've got some sun-dried tomatoes here. I'm just gonna go ahead and chop these up into small pieces. I need about a 1/4 cup of these. Okay, so now at this point, my veggies are soft. I've got onion, celery, squash, garlic, and zucchini. I'm gonna add my 2 cans of beans, which I rinsed and drained. 1 can of diced tomatoes. Got some peas here. I'm gonna add my vegetable broth, pasta, sun-dried tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. I like to use this kind in a jar because it is very, very convenient to store in the refrigerator. I'm gonna go ahead and add all of my dried spices and 4 cups of water. Okay, so before I cook this, I just wanna make sure that everything is mixed up. Sorry, we've got some intense gaming going on here. I'm gonna cook this on high pressure for 6 minutes. Okay, so after the soup was done, I went ahead and released the pressure. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give this a stir. Everything looks cooked. And then I'm going to add in 4 cups of spinach. Obviously that doesn't need to cook because the soup is still very, very warm and it will just wilt down. And then at this point, I don't know, I'm gonna see, I may add some more broth just because right now it's a little more like a stew and I would like it to be a little bit more soupy. What better fall recipe than an Instant Pot applesauce? I've done this once before, but it's been a while. Super simple to make applesauce either in the slow cooker or the Instant Pot. I'll have the recipe linked down below. Basically, you'll need 8 apples. I have 2 like really large Granny Smith and then a couple smaller varieties. I only have 7 apples on hand, so we're gonna like improvise and use 1 pear as well, but this pear is like it's very hard, so it'll be fine. And then all you need is lemon juice, water, and some cinnamon. And then once the applesauce is done, we will taste it to see if it needs any sweetener. You can add either regular sugar or Splenda or stevia, whatever you want. But now I'm going to go ahead and give these apples and 1 pear a peel. Okay, so I've got my apples peeled. I'm going to cut these up into uniform chunks. You just kind of want to make sure that they're all same size. Pear is not ripe at all. As you can see, my mise en knife makes quick work of it. So for the apples, I just basically cut them in half and then cut them in half again, and then you can use your knife to cut out the core just on an angle, and that, you know, part will have the seeds in it, and then you just kind of toss that out, and then I just cut each wedge in half so they're about, I don't know, approximately 1.5 inch chunks. All right, so in my Instant Pot, I'm gonna add 1 cup of water. I need 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, so that's probably gonna be about half a lemon, and then half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And I'm just gonna kind of stir this together a little bit to mix it up. Okay, so then you can add your apples. If you have a bench scraper, that is a really handy tool for transferring items. I'll link a really inexpensive one down below. Before I turn on the Instant Pot, I'm just gonna toss this mixture a little bit just to make sure that all of the apples are as evenly coated as I can get them. So I'm gonna put this on high pressure for 8 minutes. This is actually an Elec Homes electric pressure cooker. There are many generic versions of Instant Pot electric pressure cookers. Some people ask me if they, I think the Instant Pot brand is worth it. I would say, the functionality is the same. They're both gonna do the same thing for you. I find the Instant Pot like buttons and interface to be more intuitive and I like it better, but this one works just as well. And sometimes it's nice to have two, especially if you're cooking multiple things. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this cook on high pressure 8 minutes, and then we'll let it do a natural pressure release. Okay, so here's what the applesauce looks like when it's complete. Actually, it's pretty much already in applesauce form. All of the apples have disintegrated, but there's a few chunks. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use a potato masher to mash it. I did also taste this and I thought it was just a tiny bit sour, so I'm gonna add just about a teaspoon of this baking sugar alternative, maybe a tablespoon. It's in a large batch. I don't want it super sweet, I just don't want it to be sour. I'm gonna stir that in. All right, to store my applesauce, I'm going to put it into a mason jar. I have a funnel here and that is the best way to get it in there without making a mess. These are super inexpensive. You can get them either at the store or online. I'll link the one I have down below. So my whole batch probably isn't gonna fit in this one jar, but I'm gonna fill this up and then see how much I have left. And like I said, you can just add seasoning to your taste. Not necessarily seasoning, I guess, but sugar and cinnamon would be the key word there. And this works really great if you have apples to use up in your fruit bowl or your fridge, because even the apples that are bruised, they're fine. You just throw them in there. Okay, so here's the applesauce I ended up with. I would say I probably ended up with about 4 cups. So I'm gonna stick this in the fridge. It's really delicious. You can keep it in the fridge for about 7 to 10 days, and you can also freeze it. I would also recommend, if it's for your kids, packing it into these individual containers, and then you can have it in their lunch or for breakfast or whatever. Okay, so for dinner tonight, I am gonna be making this recipe for pot roast in the Instant Pot. My sister said that she uses this recipe and it's really good. I've got some chuck roast here. I just kind of cut this into chunks so I could brown it better and fit it into the Instant Pot, but I've got mine here preheating with a little bit of olive oil in the bottom. And the first thing that I'm going to do is put my onion in there and brown that. And while that's browning, I'm gonna go and grab my carrots and give those a peel. So I've browned my onions. I'm gonna remove those. I went ahead and added my carrots in here, and I'm just gonna give those a little bit of color. Okay, and the next step is gonna be to brown my chuck roast. So I just have my olive oil on the bottom of there. I'm gonna brown these pieces and then I'll finish browning these two. Once it's all browned up, we will deglaze with some red wine. But here are the veggies I cooked up. We're not gonna add these until a little bit later, but you can see they have some really nice color on them. All right, so our beef is cooked. We're gonna deglaze with half a cup of red wine. And I'm gonna scrape all those brown bits up from the bottom of the pot. Okay, so I added some garlic. I'm gonna add about a cup of beef broth. And then the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fish sauce and 1 tablespoon Worcestershire sauce. So that's what I have in here. I'm gonna stir this around, add the meat back in, and I think the onions. Okay, so no onions back in yet. The onions go in later. So put my meat back in here. I've got my broth in the bottom with the wine. I put in some fresh rosemary and some fresh thyme. So we're gonna put the lid on this. And then this is gonna cook on high pressure for 50 minutes. All right, so the 50 minutes are up, and I also let it do a 10-minute natural pressure release. And oh my god, this is falling apart. It looks delicious. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove the beef to a pan. I'm gonna cover it and let it rest, and then I'm gonna put the veggies back in. All right, so potatoes are in. We're gonna add the carrots and the onions, and I'm gonna cook this on high pressure for I think 6 minutes. Okay, so just finished with the potatoes and the carrots. The potatoes turned out really tender, as you can see, as did the carrots. So I'm gonna fix up a plate and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so here's what my plate it looks like. You can make a gravy out of the like au jus, but we don't, or I typically don't. I normally just like spoon the broth over the food. So I've got potatoes, kind of mash them a little bit, put some butter, salt, pepper, broth, carrots, and the pot roast. This turned out really good. I would highly recommend this recipe. I will link it down below. Okay, so I thought it would be fun to include a dessert recipe in this video. So we are gonna make pumpkin cheesecake in the Instant Pot. I've been cooking with an Instant Pot for a very long time, but I have never made cheesecake in it. So this is gonna be an adventure. So I have my 8-quart Instant Pot here. I have a trivet in the bottom. We're actually gonna use a 7-inch springform pan. I believe I picked this up at Aldi, but it was a seasonal item, so I can link a similar one down below. But essentially we're gonna be putting water in the bottom of the Instant Pot, and then the cheesecake will sit up here and it will bake like that. I will link the original recipe that I'm using down below, but I'm gonna modify a few things just to make it have a little less sugar. So for the crust, I am going to be using some pecans, some walnuts that I have here, and some of these grain-free cookies. This is the peanut butter flavor, but honestly, I'm just gonna use a little bit of it for like the crunch factor. The original recipe, I believe, calls for ginger snap cookies. I also have some melted butter. Instead of sugar, I'm gonna be using this baking sugar alternative from King Arthur Baking Company. So it's sugar-free. I've got pumpkin pie spice, cinnamon, some vanilla, half a cup of heavy cream, pinch of salt. I'm gonna need 12 ounces of cream cheese, which I have softened, some cornstarch, eggs, and 1 cup of pumpkin puree. All right, so I've got my food processor here. I'm gonna use this to make the crust. So in this measuring cup, I've just got some of those paleo cookies, I guess, and some nuts. Stick those into the food processor, and we're just gonna process these into fine crumbs. You could also, like the recipe says, use ginger snap cookies or even graham crackers. Okay, so that is into fine crumbs. I've got half a stick of butter here that I melted. And then the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of sugar. I'm just gonna use about half a tablespoon just because those cookies that I used are partially, sweetened anyway. And then I'll blend this up. Okay, so see how it kind of all comes together like that? I'm gonna pat this out into the bottom of the pan. So here's my completed crust. I just sprayed this pan with cooking spray and just kind of pressed the crust mixture into the bottom of the pan. So this is gonna go in the freezer while we make the filling. I have my stand mixer here, and in the bowl I've got 12 ounces of cream cheese. I'm gonna use the whisk attachment because I think sometimes I feel like that gives the cheesecake a creamier texture. Definitely, you're not probably gonna be able to do this by hand, so don't worry. If you don't have a stand mixer, just use a hand mixer. It'll work just fine. So I'm gonna whip this up until it is softened. I'm gonna add a little less than half of a cup of that sugar substitute. Sometimes I find when I'm using sugar substitute that I like to use a little bit less because it can be strong. And then in this bowl here, I've got my cornstarch, pumpkin pie spice, and a pinch of salt. I'm gonna turn this on, and then I will add the eggs one at a time. So I just realized the one thing I didn't do was I didn't add any cinnamon to the crust mixture, which I was supposed to, but that's fine. It'll all work out. So I'm gonna scrape down the sides. Make sure that you're always, doing that when you have a stand mixer, especially and you're making some type of batter, because otherwise everything won't get mixed properly. I did just go ahead and add a few extra shakes of cinnamon in here so that can compensate for the lack of cinnamon in my crust. So the last step is to add my pumpkin puree. I have a cup of that. I had a little bit left in the can since the can of pumpkin is more than a cup, but I'll figure out something else to do with that. You can also freeze pumpkin puree if you need to. I'm gonna add some vanilla. And then while that's beating, I'm gonna stream in the heavy cream, just half a cup. So filling is done. I'm gonna go ahead and pour that into my crust. It smells really good. I love me a good pumpkin cheesecake. I'm gonna pour 1.5 cups of water into the bottom of the Instant Pot. That is actually what's going to steam the cheesecake. And then I'm gonna carefully put this into, whoops, I said carefully. I'm gonna stick that in there. Hope that's level. I'm going to put the lid on this and cook this on high pressure for 28 minutes. So here's what our cheesecake looks like. I let it do a natural pressure release for about 30 minutes, which basically just means letting it sit without releasing the pressure valve. So I'm gonna carefully remove this and put it on a wire rack, and we're just gonna let it cool at room temperature for about an hour. So for this fall Instant Pot recipe, we're going to make a 1-pot pork tenderloin and mashed potatoes. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. So I've got my Instant Pot here. I've got about a 1.5 pound pork tenderloin that I got from the store. I just rinsed it and dried it. I'm going to rub this with some spices. So in here I've got salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, and Italian seasoning. I'm gonna use this garlic infused olive oil to saute the pork. I also need 3 cups of chicken broth. I'm using the Knorr chicken bouillon just because it's super convenient to mix that up. I've got some potatoes here. Those are actually going to cook with the pork. I'm going to end up peeling and slicing those. And then for the mashed potatoes, I've got some butter, cream cheese, milk, salt, and pepper. I will link this original recipe down below. I've got my Instant Pot heating to saute, and I'm going to put a couple tablespoons of the garlic infused olive oil in there. So for the pork, I'm just going to go ahead and mix these spices up and sprinkle those on there, and then just rub the spices in. All right, so my Instant Pot is heated up. I'm gonna go ahead and put my tenderloin in there. I'm gonna put it fat side down first, and if your Instant Pot is too small to hold your pork loin, just cut it in half. As this sautés, I'm just gonna turn it over and try to get it browned on all sides before I remove it from the pot. All right, so this pork is done browning on all sides. It looks great. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of chicken broth to the bottom to deglaze. And you just wanna take a spoon, and while that boils off, just scrape the brown bits off the bottom of the pot. Smells really good. All right, so while my Instant Pot is deglazing, I've got my potatoes here. I already peeled them, and I'm just gonna go ahead and slice these into maybe about 1/2-inch pieces. You don't want them super small because we are gonna end up cooking these in the Instant Pot, and we want them to get tender but not necessarily fall apart. If you guys have not tried these Misen chef's knives, I highly recommend them. I have been using them for, I don't know, I'd have to go back and look, but it's probably been over a year now. Just in regular everyday life and on my channel, I honestly probably use these every single day because I cook a lot, and I highly recommend them. They are fantastic quality and they hold up really well. Make sure that you don't put them in the dishwasher, don't soak them in water, take really good care of them, and they'll last forever. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that all the brown bits are scraped off the bottom of the pot, and they are in with the broth, which is what you want. That's all the flavor from searing the meat. We're gonna make a gravy after this is all said and done. All right, I've got my sliced potatoes here, so I'm just gonna put those in the Instant Pot. I'm gonna make sure those are in an even layer, and then I'm gonna add my pork loin that's been seared over the top of those. Add the remainder of my chicken broth. All right, so this definitely doesn't take long at all. It just takes a 5-minute cook time on high pressure. So we're gonna do manual and then turn it down to 5. And then after it's done cooking, we'll do a natural pressure release. So after the pork and the potatoes are done cooking, you wanna do a natural pressure release, which I just took the lid off. That took about 24 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the pork to a plate and cover that with foil, and then we'll mash the potatoes and make the gravy. All right, so here's what we're gonna do to finish this meal. So I've got a bowl here. I'm gonna go ahead and put my mashed potato ingredients in there. So again, I've got cream cheese, butter, and some milk, or half and half, whatever you want to use. I'm gonna use a slotted spoon to take the potatoes out and put them on top of the dairy mixture. That way it will help just it start melting. And then we'll go ahead and mash that and season it to taste. Obviously it might need salt and pepper. Okay, so with like the juice or the broth or whatever you want to call it that is left in the bottom of the pan, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the Instant Pot on saute. And then I'm going to stir in a mixture of just cold water and cornstarch. This is gonna help thicken it, you know, into a gravy, and we'll whisk that as it thickens up. For the mashed potatoes, I've got a potato masher here, and I'm just gonna mash these, make sure everything is seasoned properly, and when everything is done, I will show you how our plate looks. All right, so here's what this dish looks like plated up. I'm not kidding. This may be like the most delicious thing I've ever cooked in the Instant Pot. I highly recommend you give it a try. The pork is super, super tender and easy to cut. The mashed potatoes are really delicious because, again, they were like cooked and seasoned with the pork broth. The gravy turned out good. I just sprinkled it with some parsley. We are gonna have this with a side salad, but again, highly recommend this recipe. It turned out so good. So next up, I've got a fun fall meal. I'm going to be making a pumpkin cheese ball, a roasted beef tenderloin, some lemon pecorino broccoli, and then a maple cheesecake. Okay, so when I make cheese balls, I love to do it in my stand mixer. I just think that it is the easiest way to quickly combine all the ingredients. So in the bowl, I have a couple packages of cream cheese, and I'm adding some finely shredded sharp cheddar cheese. Once that is combined, I'm going to add a pat of softened butter along with some pureed pumpkin. This is not pumpkin pie filling. It's just plain pureed pumpkin. And I was honestly a little bit skeptical about this dish. I wasn't quite sure about the pumpkin flavor, but it's very subtle and definitely gives the cheese ball a nice texture. So I'm taking some sage off of my plant here on the deck. I grow my own herbs on my deck, and you do not need to be a gardening aficionado to do this. If I can keep them alive, you can too. So I need about 2 tablespoons of sage for this recipe, and I'm just going to roll that up tightly and mince that as finely as I can. For any kitchen tools I use in this recipe, I will have all of those linked in the description box below. If you guys are looking for a specific item or tool, you'll be able to find it there more easily. To the cheese mixture, I added in my sage. I'm also adding some smoked paprika, some salt, and some garlic powder, and mixing that up. Once the mixture is well combined, I'm going to turn that out onto a couple pieces of plastic wrap, and I'm going to roll that up into a ball, spin it around, and pack it as tightly as I can, and that goes in the refrigerator to chill. Once it is about halfway chilled, you can wrap some rubber bands around it. This is optional, but it does make it look more like a pumpkin, and of course I want to be extra like that, so of course I did it. So I put that back in the fridge, and here is what it looked like a couple hours later. It comes out like a little pumpkin cheese ball. How cute is that? And it's orange because cheese is orange. This is super cute, and I would definitely make it again. Like I said, you can't really taste the pumpkin a lot. It's like a very subtle flavor. It's definitely savory, not sweet, so don't be worried. But I did coat it with some shredded cheese. I put a little pretzel on top for the stem, and then I put a few more sage leaves in there just for the leaves of the pumpkin. Now this is definitely like extra, and you don't necessarily have to do this, but like I said, if you're putting it on a fall cheese board, I think it's super cute. So here's what that turned out like. We had it with some crackers as an appetizer for dinner. Totally delicious. Definitely try this. Super easy and impressive. Okay, so next up we are going to go on to the main course, which is a roasted beef tenderloin with mushroom sauce. My meat-eating husband was definitely super happy about this recipe. So what I have here is a whole beef tenderloin. I actually had this in the freezer from several months ago. They had them on sale at the grocery store, and I think I bought 3 of them at that time. And so I thawed this out, and I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to try out this recipe. So what I'm doing is just tying this up, and the reason I'm doing that that is just to keep all the meat together and keep it sort of in a tight bundle so it will cook evenly. Now, I did go ahead and trim some of the fat off of this before I tied it up, so make sure you do that as well. I seasoned it with salt and pepper, and next I'm going to wash up my mushrooms. So if you guys have watched my videos before, you know that I don't really care for mushrooms, but there are times when I do things just for my husband, and that is cook a huge pan of mushrooms. But anyway, right now I am heating up my skillet to brown my beef tenderloin. So once that skillet was screaming hot, I went ahead and added the piece of meat in, and you just want to sear that on all sides. It will probably take about 5 to 8 minutes, kind of turning it over. You want to make sure that you sear it all the way around. And while that was finishing searing in the skillet, I'm going to chop up some more veggies for the mushroom mixture. So the recipe calls for some shallot, so I'm going to go ahead and mince that up. I find shallots a little bit hard to chop. I do like using them because I like the milder flavor, you know, rather than use like a strong white onion or something like that. But I do find them a little bit tedious to chop. But anyway, I'm just going to mince those up as finely as I can, and that will go into the skillet once the beef comes out of the oven. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm using this Cuisinart skillet, which goes from stovetop to oven rather nicely. I'll be sure to link that down below. It's one of my favorite skillets. I love it. It's nice and big, and I can fit a ton of food in there. So next up, after my mushrooms were washed up, I'm going to go ahead and chop those. I actually do really like chopping mushrooms, even though I don't like eating them. I've talked about before that I actually really like chopping food. I don't know, it's just super relaxing to me. But anyway, you want to go ahead and chop all these up. You don't need to chop them super fine or super small because you're going to cook them down in the skillet, and obviously they will decrease quite a bit in volume. So here are my mushrooms all chopped up. Those are just waiting to go into the pan after the roast comes out of the oven. And then I also minced up some garlic to go in the pan with my shallots. So now the steak or the beef roast is done in the oven. That was in there for about 30 minutes. I'm going to take that out, remove it to a platter, and cover it with foil to keep it warm. I am using the same skillet along with all that nice beef juices in there, and adding my mushrooms to that along with a pat of butter, and I'll just saute those down until they are nice and lovely and delicious. I'm saying that because I assume these mushrooms are delicious. I personally didn't eat them, but my husband told me they were they were delicious. Once the mushrooms were cooked down most of the way, I'm adding in the shallot and the garlic and cooking that through. Next, I'm going to add some dry white wine. The original recipe calls for sherry. I seriously have the hardest time finding that around here. I live in Iowa, and you guys hear me talk all the time about trying to find ingredients, but the white wine worked just fine. So I added that along with some fresh thyme, put the beef tenderloin back in the skillet, and boom, that was done. We're gonna just wait on that while we cook the broccoli. So I am making this recipe for pecorino romano lemon roasted broccoli, and this was killer. It was delicious. I have to say, my family did not like it much, but if you like roasted broccoli, this is awesome. And the flavor of the pecorino romano cheese along with the lemon juice is just, it's bomb. I love it. I will definitely be making this again, even if I'm the only one using it. So I'm washing my broccoli in my salad spinner, gave it a good dry off, and then I'm putting it on a sheet tray that I had lined with foil. I'm drizzling some olive oil over the top, about 1/4 cup, and then I'll just season that with salt and pepper. And the great thing about this broccoli recipe is it actually roasts at the same temperature as the steak does, so you're kind of able to cook everything at the same time. You guys probably saw I had baked potatoes roasting in there in the oven as well. So I shredded up some pecorino romano cheese. Again, that was pricey. I don't know that I've purchased authentic pecorino cheese before, but I would definitely do it again because it was delicious and well worth the price. I'm seasoning my broccoli, and then I do like to kind of toss the broccoli around with the oil and the seasonings just to make sure that it all gets coated. So once that comes out of the oven and it's all roasted, you zest a lemon over the broccoli, which is the bomb if you like lemon. I just love citrus flavors. My husband isn't really that into it, but for this meal, he definitely got the mushrooms and I got the roasted broccoli, so everyone was happy. So I, after I zested the lemon over the broccoli, I am just juicing another lemon over the broccoli, or that same lemon actually, and then you can pile on that delicious shredded cheese. Yum. Do you guys like roasted broccoli with cheese? This is seriously the first recipe for roasted broccoli and cheese that I have really, really loved. So definitely try that out. Here's what it looked like when it was all finished. And then we had this alongside of the roasted beef tenderloin. I also made the baked potatoes. I put some shredded cheese on there, sour cream, salt, and pepper, and that was a bomb dinner. Okay, so lastly, I'm sharing a fall-inspired cheesecake with you guys. So I'm starting out with some graham crackers in the food processor, or you could totally buy pre-crumbled graham crackers, whatever you want to do. I'm adding some sugar into the food processor along with some melted butter, and that will be the crust for these maple cheesecake bars. I want to mention also that I did cut this recipe in half. The original recipe calls for it to be made in a 13x9 pan, which makes quite a bit of cheesecake. And if you were making it for a lot of people, I think that would be fine. But we're not having gatherings at this time, and your girl definitely does not need a whole pan of 13x9 size cheesecake in my house, or I would be eating cheesecake for every single meal. So I lined my 8x8 dish with foil, sprayed it with a little bit of cooking spray, and I'm packing the crust mixture in there, flattening the bottom of it with a measuring cup, and I'm going to pop that into the oven just for about 10 minutes to let the crust cook through. The best thing about using a food processor to make your graham cracker crumbs is that you can then rinse it out and use it to make your cheesecake batter. So in there I have 2 packages of softened cream cheese. I'm pouring in some maple syrup and some white sugar, and then I'm just going to process that until everything comes together. Alternatively, you could also use a regular hand mixer or a stand mixer for this, but you'll definitely need some type of electric mixer if you want to make cheesecake and get it nice and smooth. Next, I'm going to add some eggs, and I just went ahead and let the food processor run while I added those, and it also calls for some cream, the recipe does, so I added that too. I was kind of wondering if this recipe was going to have a super strong maple flavor, and it does have like a little subtle bit of a maple flavor, but not too much. So if you're someone like me that's not totally down with the strong maple flavor, I would still recommend making these because they turn out perfect. So I added some flour, some sour cream, and some vanilla, and then let that mix up the rest of the way, and my batter was done. So I'm pouring this over the crust mixture. Is there anything better than cheesecake? I think not. I love cheesecake. I never met a cheesecake I didn't like, seriously. So while that was in the oven cooking, I went ahead and made the whipped cream that goes on the top. This is just some heavy whipping cream, about 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla bean paste along with some powdered sugar, and then you just whip that up with a whisk or a stand mixer until the cream is at stiff peaks. Do not over whip it or you will definitely have butter. Okay, so here's what the cheesecake looks like when it came out of the oven. You want to let that cool for about an hour at room temperature, then pop it in the fridge for it to chill the rest of the way. I would recommend using this vanilla bean paste. I get it on Amazon, so I'll link it down below, but it gives your whipped cream like these little flecks of vanilla, which I just think is so neat and fancy, and it tastes delicious. So I also refrigerated the whipped cream, and then voila, when it's done, you can just pull the cheesecake out of the pan, or when it's done refrigerating, pull the cheesecake out of the pan. I'm just using my knife to cut this into about 9 pieces, I think. I actually had a piece missing because my daughter had asked for a piece before it was fully refrigerated, and I let her have one. But here's what that looks like. This was so creamy and delicious. I will definitely be making this recipe again, and I hope you guys try it. I served it with the whipped cream and a couple of blueberries on top, and that was it. Okay, so I'm starting dinner, and I'll link this recipe down below, but what I did was I separated 4 eggs. So I've got the egg whites in here with some salt, and I'm going to cook those. Those are going to go into the fried rice. And then these are the egg yolks, and what I'm going to do is put 4 cups of cold rice in there. This is rice that I meal prepped. and then stir that around, and the egg yolk will like coat the rice, and when it cooks it'll make it crispy, I guess is the idea. And then this is the fish that I seasoned. It's tilapia. I had a little bit of a packet of the McCormick savory seasoning, so I used that along with some garlic salt, pepper, and then I put a little bit of soy sauce on there as well. So here's what the rice looks like. It's interesting. I don't think I've ever made fried rice like this before. And then here's the egg whites. So I'm just cooking these in a nonstick skillet until they are just set through, and then I'll remove these to a plate and cook the fish. Okay, so this turned out so good. I would definitely recommend this recipe. So here is the fried rice. I put the egg whites back in, fried it until it's nice and crispy, and then this is the fish that I seasoned on the side. All right, so here is dinner. I also made some steamed green beans on the side. I am going to make these swirled pumpkin cheesecake bars, and the reason why I was looking for a recipe with pumpkin is because I made some copycat Starbucks pumpkin spice latte syrup, and I only used 2 tablespoons out of a can of pumpkin, and so I had the rest of this in the fridge. And so yeah, I'm gonna make these. I have all the ingredients for them. I didn't plan ahead, but it's just basically a graham cracker crust, and then there's like a pumpkin pie layer with a cheesecake swirl. I'm probably gonna make a couple substitutions. I'm using 1/3 less fat cream cheese. I'll probably use sugar substitute instead of regular sugar, and I am using a little less butter than the recipe calls for in the graham cracker crust, but let me show you how to make it. So the crust calls for 3 cups of crushed graham cracker crumbs, and I have almost well, about 2/3 of a box of graham crackers, so I just put 2 sleeves in there. So we'll crush these up and see how much that is. All right, so I have a 13 by 9 dish that I sprayed with cooking spray, and then I mix the graham crackers with butter and sugar, and I'm just gonna press these in the bottom of the pan. The easiest way to do that is to use the bottom of a glass, like a flat one, or you can use the bottom of a measuring cup and just use it to pack the crust down in. And the reason why you want to line this with foil is so that you can easily lift these out and cut them into squares. Oh, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I went ahead and wiped out the bowl of my food processor, and I'm just going to use this to make the cream cheese layer. So what I have in here is 1 package of the Neufchâtel 1/3 less fat cream cheese, 1 egg yolk, 1 egg, a 1/2 cup of the Lakanto monk fruit sweetener. I usually try, not always, but mostly try to, Connor's gaming over there, to substitute this in most baking recipes because it does cut down on the sugar and the glycemic index and the calories, and you can't even really tell the difference. And then a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste, or you could use vanilla extract. All right, so for the pumpkin layer, we've got pumpkin, some eggs, heavy cream, vanilla, pumpkin pie spice, and some Lakanto sweetener. So I'm just gonna whisk this up.
I just took the risk of my life. It took a super long time to get here because stupid cartoon cat is camping here.
Yeah.
And Siren is just on top of me. I can show you proof. Here, you can hear.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, it's super
The
loud.
risk of your life.
Yeah. Okay, so I was in this thing that I was getting killed from.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just moving. I just ran super fast before he killed me.
Mm-hmm.
And he like damaged me a little bit, and then I got away and ran in this. I was like in a little thing that's not safe.
Not safe. Whenever I try to film with foil, it screws the lighting all up and it makes it so ugly. So I do apologize about that. But you get the gist. This reminds me of those brownies with the cheesecake swirl. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, those are so good. All right. Boom. All right, so these are gonna bake for about 40 minutes. I'm gonna set it for 38. We'll see if that's good. Wow, that did puff up, but look how beautiful it looks. All right, so I'm gonna let this cool for 30 minutes before I put it in the fridge. I am going to make these slow cooker beef tips for dinner tonight. I know it's Monday, and technically it's supposed to be meatless Monday, but we'll do that another night this week. I was going to make these yesterday for slow cooker Sunday. However, I really wanted Adam to be able to try this recipe, and since he'll be back today, I'm making it today. So what I did was I thawed out some sirloin and cubed it up. I have a little bit here in the slow cooker that I already browned, and then I'm browning up the other part of it in a skillet. And I just season this with salt and pepper, and I have some onion in the bottom of the slow cooker. So once this is brown, I'm going to remove it to the slow cooker, and then in this container, or measuring cup rather, I have some beef broth that I mixed up and some Worcestershire, and the recipe calls for red wine, but I don't have any red wine. So instead, I put a couple of tablespoons of cherry jam in here. Not really enough to make it sweet, but I thought that it would maybe give it a little bit of that jammy red wine flavor. So once the beef is done, I'll pour this in, deglaze the pan with that, and then I'll put everything in the slow cooker and cook it on low all day. I'm going to start making the mashed potatoes for dinner now.
To find a sunset, a flavor of a memory, whenever all the stars above are shining, then I know I'll never be alone.
Okay, so normally I make honey butter carrots on the stove, but I'm going to try doing them in the air fryer today just because I feel like it. So let's just push the carrot button and see what happens. Okay, so I'm adding the cornstarch mixture into the beef tips now, and I'll just let that simmer and thicken until it's time to eat. Okay, so potatoes are done. I am going to go ahead and mash these up. I just have a little bit of cream cheese in there, a splash of milk, and some butter, and salt and pepper. Okay, so the carrots turned out really good. I just drizzled them with a little bit of honey, and they are perfect. Alright, so this is a review on the pumpkin cheesecake bars. I think they're really good. I don't know about the crust. I don't understand why the crust is so thick, or like why it needs to be so thick. When I made it, it kind of seemed like a lot of graham cracker crumbs, but it's really good. My phone. No, it was my phone vibrating. I actually used regular sugar in the crust, but then the rest of it I used the Lakanto monk fruit sweetener, and you really can't tell that the rest of it is sugar-free. I think they'd be really good with whipped cream too. To me, I can definitely taste like the pumpkin pie more than the cheesecake, but it's really good. I'd make them again for sure. Don't forget to check out Warby Parker. I'll have that link in the description box below where you can get your free home try on. Thank you so much for watching today. I'll have all of the recipes down below as well.